The Galactic Council of Veth had seen many things in its 5,000-year history. It had witnessed the collapse of the Druvian Empire. It had watched entire star systems get swallowed by dying suns. It had even survived the great bureaucratic war of 2,400 cycles ago, which was somehow the bloodiest conflict in recorded history, all because someone filed the wrong tax form. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared the Council for the humans. My name is Zoran Velturis. I am the senior ambassador of the Veth Diplomatic Corps, and I have been assigned to monitor the human situation for the past 3 years. When my superiors handed me this posting, they smiled. Not the warm kind of smile. The kind of smile you give someone before they step into a room full of bees. I should have run. It started as most terrible things do, with a king. King Dovath of the Veth Dominion was old in the way that stars get old, slow, heavy, burning through whatever fuel was left just to stay relevant. He had 5 daughters, 5 princesses of legendary beauty and legendary arrogance, each one raised on the absolute certainty that they were the finest creatures the universe had ever bothered to produce. Princess Rova, the eldest, who once made a star cartographer cry simply by sighing in his direction. Princess Ilya, the second-born, who had rejected 47 marriage proposals from 47 different civilizations, including one from a species that could literally bend gravity. Princess Sarra, the middle daughter, sharp-tongued and brilliant, who had written an academic paper titled, "Why Lesser Species Should Be Grateful We Allow Them to Breathe." Princess Dune, the quieter one, which honestly made her more dangerous because quiet people are always plotting. And Princess Vekka, the youngest, who laughed at everything and everyone, loudly, without apology, and usually at the worst possible moment. King Dovath, facing the political reality that his dominion needed alliances, had made a decree. A wild, shocking, career-ending decree that sent every diplomat in the galaxy into either hysterical laughter or quiet panic, depending on their proximity to the situation. He declared that whichever male from any species at all, could win the hearts of all 5 of his daughters, would inherit the Dominion. The entire galaxy laughed. Then they read the fine print. Win their hearts did not mean poetry. It did not mean flowers or diplomatic flattery or showing up with a nice bottle of imported nebula wine. The king, bless his ancient dramatic soul, had worded it in the old Veth tradition. A tradition that was very biological, very specific. If a suitor could get all 5 princesses to willingly, enthusiastically choose him as their partner and bear his children, the Dominion was his. Now, you might be thinking, Zoran, surely no sane being would attempt this. And you would be right. Every civilization with 2 brain cells to rub together immediately withdrew from consideration. The Druks sent a very polite letter. The Yennari people sent a fruit basket and a note that said, absolutely not. Even the gravity-bending species from earlier said they had prior commitments. But then the humans found out. I was in my office when I received the notification. It was a Tuesday, which I have learned is a deeply suspicious day on Earth. Humans do strange things on Tuesdays. I read the message twice. I read it a third time. I poured myself a drink. I read it again. One human had submitted a formal application to compete for the Veth Dominion. His name was Bram Osei, and according to his attached profile, he was 31 years old, a former agricultural engineer from a place called Accra, currently working as a deep space logistics coordinator, and in the hobbies section of his application, he had written, quote, "I work well under pressure." That was it. That was the whole application. I immediately flagged it as a joke. My supervisor flagged it back as legitimate. I flagged it again. He called me personally. He said, "Zoran, the humans are not joking." There was a pause. They never joke about competition. The princesses, upon hearing a human had applied, did something I will never forget for the rest of my career. They laughed. Rova laughed until she knocked over a decorative vase worth more than most planets. Ilya laughed so hard, her hair came undone. Sarra, brilliant Sarra, actually published a follow-up academic paper within 48 hours titled The Human Application, a Case Study in Delusion. Vekka simply looked at the photo of Bram Osei on the application form, tilted her head, and said, "He has nice eyes." Then she laughed too, only Dune said nothing. I noticed that. I wrote it down. Bram Osei arrived at the Veth Royal Station on a bomb Thursday. He stepped off his ship wearing clothes that were slightly wrinkled, carrying a bag that was definitely too small for someone about to court the 5 most powerful women in the galaxy. He looked up at the towering golden architecture of the Veth Dominion and said, smaller than I expected." I was standing right there. I heard it. The station guards heard it. 3 of them exchanged glances. I walked up to him because it was my job, and I said, "Mr. Osei, do you understand what you have signed up for?" He smiled. It was a very calm smile. The kind of smile that either belongs to someone completely fearless or someone who has made a terrible mistake and has not yet been informed. "Ambassador," he said, "I grew up with 4 sisters." He picked up his bag and walked inside. And somewhere, deep in the royal chambers, Princess Dune stopped what she was doing, looked up for no reason she could explain, and felt the strangest feeling she had not felt in decades. Curiosity. Nobody gave Bram Osei a welcome party. What he got instead was a schedule. A brutal, humiliating, deliberately designed schedule created personally by Princess Sarra, who had apparently stayed up all night building it with the specific intention of making a human being question every life choice that had led him to this moment. Day 1 was a formal dinner with all 5 princesses. Sounds simple. It was not simple. The dinner table was the size of a football field. The food was specifically chosen to be things humans had never encountered, and the seating arrangement placed Bram at the absolute far end, so far from the princesses that normal conversation was physically impossible. Princess Rova did not even look at him. She spent the entire dinner talking to her attendant about a new necklace. Princess Ilya glanced at him once, the way you glance at a strange insect that has wandered into your home and then looked away. Princess Sarra had a notebook. She was writing in it, about him. Not kindly. Princess Vekka kept giggling, every few minutes. Just giggling. And Princess Dune sat at the end, closest to him, which I only noticed because it was not where she was originally seated, and she said nothing, but she did push a small dish of something edible and human-safe quietly in his direction without looking at him. Bram ate it. He also ate everything else they put in front of him, including the thing that was still moving slightly, which made 2 of the royal guards flinch. He did not flinch. Day 2 was a combat demonstration. The princesses were not required to fight him. They were simply required to watch, because tradition demanded that a suitor prove physical capability before the royal court. The opponent chosen for Bram was a Veth warrior named Gruul, who was 7 feet tall, built like a building, had learned to be angry, and had not lost a formal match in 11 years. The entire court assembled. The princesses sat in elevated seats. Sarra had her notebook again. Gruul looked at Bram the way oceans look at sand. Bram looked at Gruul, tilted his head slightly and said, "You lead with your right shoulder, yeah?" Gruul blinked. "What?" The match lasted 4 minutes. Bram lost the first 2 minutes badly, which I suspect he allowed to happen while he was reading the man's movement patterns. Then something shifted in his posture, some quiet internal gear, change that you could not name but absolutely could feel, and he won the next 2 minutes in a way that made the court go completely silent. Gruul sat on the floor looking genuinely surprised. Bram offered him a hand up. Gruul took it. Vekka stopped giggling. That was the first sign. Day 3 through day 7 were a series of intellectual challenges designed by Sarra herself. Planetary resource allocation puzzles, ancient Veth language, decoding. A philosophical debate conducted in front of the full court on the question of whether lesser civilizations had the right to self-governance. Bram sat down at that debate, looked across at the assembled scholars and said, "I think the question itself is the problem. You don't get to decide who is lesser. That is what every empire in history has said right before it collapsed." Silence. Sarra's pen stopped moving. She looked up at him for the first time, actually looked, and something behind her eyes did a thing that her face was trained not to show. I saw it anyway. It is literally my job to see things like that. She wrote something in her notebook. She turned the page so no one could read it. By the end of week 1, Vekka had stopped laughing at him and started laughing with him, which is a completely different thing and much more dangerous. She had also started showing up wherever he happened to be, which she denied was intentional and which everyone could see was absolutely intentional. Rova cracked on day 11. It was not a dramatic moment. It was a small one. Bram had overheard her arguing with a trade official who was speaking over her, interrupting her mid-sentence, treating her the way powerful men treat powerful women when they think no one important is watching. Bram walked over, stood beside her, said nothing, just stood there, and the trade official suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. Rova looked at Bram afterward and said, "I did not need that." Bram said, "I know. I did it for me. I don't like watching that." She did not thank him, but she remembered. Ilya was the hardest. 47 rejections had not made her cold exactly. They had made her careful, the way people become careful when they have been disappointed enough times by enough people they believed in. She tested Bram constantly. Small, sharp tests. Questions designed to expose selfishness or arrogance, or the particular kind of fragile ego she had learned to recognize. In suitors who wanted the Dominion more than they wanted her, he failed none of them, not because he was performing, but because he genuinely did not appear to want the Dominion at all, which was so confusing to everyone involved that even King Dovath called me into his chambers to ask if the human was perhaps mentally unwell. Said, "Your Majesty, I think he just actually likes your daughters." The king stared at me for a long time. That is the strangest thing anyone has ever said in this room. Dune was last, and Dune was different. She did not test him. She simply talked to him in the evenings in the garden section of the station where the imported earth plants had been placed as a diplomatic gesture 3 years prior and had proceeded to aggressively overgrow everything around them, which felt appropriate. She asked him once directly, "Why are you here?" The truth. Bram was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My grandmother used to say that the most important things in your life will always look impossible from the outside. I have never once in my life walked away from something because it looked impossible." Dune looked at the overgrown earth plants crowding out the carefully cultivated Veth garden. She said, "Neither have I." 4 months after Bram Osei stepped off that ship with his wrinkled clothes and his too small bag, King Dovath stood before the full Galactic Council and announced, in a voice that carried the weight of someone who had not entirely expected this outcome, that all 5 of his daughters had chosen the same man, willingly, completely, and in the full tradition of Veth law. The council erupted. There was shouting. Someone from the Yennari delegation dropped their fruit basket. Sarra stood up and said calmly to the assembled chaos, "He earned it. Every one of us. He earned it." And somewhere in the back of the chamber, I, Zoran Velturis, Senior Ambassador of the Veth Diplomatic Corps, wrote in my official report the most honest sentence of my entire career. Do not underestimate humans, not because they are the strongest, not because they are the smartest, but because they look at impossible things and feel nothing but interested. Bram Osei became the first human ruler in Veth history that evening. He named the earth plants in the garden. Every single one. The Dominion never laughed at a human again.